This is my third attempt to sit down and do this review. The first time, it was a hot mess. I was all over the place. I couldn't spit out what I wanted to say, and I was like, you know what, fine, we'll just start over. We'll just take it from the top and try again. And then I got into it, and I got all the way to the end of my second run of doing this review, and then I realized my camera stopped recording, and I was like, it's okay, it's fine. Let's just figure out where it stopped recording at, and I'll pick up where I left off. And I went back to listen to it, and I realized that Audacity was not recording this microphone, it was recording the built-in microphones on my laptop. So I had no usable audio for either of those attempts. So here I am to sit down again to review these headphones. And it just kind of feels poetic because the way I'm feeling right now is about how I feel about these headphones. I don't like them. I'm not going to recommend them. I think they are overpriced and not worth the money. So anyways, here are the HiFiman HE4XXs. They are a $189 planar headphone, and let's take a look. So the first thing I wanted to get into with these headphones is who are these for and who's buying them. I feel like headphones in the $200 range are probably going to be bought by people who are looking for a good headphone for their main daily driver. Once you get into the really expensive, $500 plus audiophile headphones, that demographic tends to buy more than one headphone. They tend to sell them and move on to something else. I feel like in that $200 range, that's someone who cares about headphones and is probably going to want them to last a long time. So that's kind of the demographic I was in, at least. So I might be projecting there, but that's how I feel about a lot of equipment in that $200 range. If you don't remember what planar is, planar, it has a mylar film, and there's kind of a snake pattern printed across it that's magnetic, and there's neodymium magnets that pulls that mylar back and forth. So the idea there is that it's a much thinner object that you're having to pull back and forth, so you should get a lot tighter control over the vibrations of the driver, and that's supposed to yield better results than a dynamic driver, which is your classic speaker that has the cone shape and a magnet that kind of pulls that back and forth. So that being said, these are kind of geared more towards that audiophile market. In that $200 range, I think that's someone who cares a lot about headphones and is looking to get a planar headphone. Here they are, they're $200. They're built well. They're, like I said, they're super comfortable. So getting into the build of these, they are built extremely well. These have fallen off of my desk more times than I care to admit. Sometimes, you turn around in the computer chair and the arm snags the cable and it just drags the headphone off. But honestly, if I hadn't told you that and I just handed these to you, you'd have thought that they were, kept in a box, because there's literally not a scratch on them. Also, the audio connectors on these inspire a lot of confidence. If you remember from my Ship 9500 re-review video, I talked about the monoprice M1060s where the tip of the audio connector snapped off inside the cup. These are a very satisfying connector. They do inspire a lot of confidence, and I'm not worried at all about these wearing out or anything breaking off whenever you're using these over time. Also, the wire that they came with is surprisingly nice. I did buy a custom wire, not because the wire it came with was no good, but because I wanted a balanced headphone wire, which would be a headphone wire that has a 4-pole connector, so just dedicated positive and negative for each ear cup. So this is the wire it comes with. It is super smooth. It's a rubberized wire, and it's a very nice wire. And like I said, the only reason I got a different wire was because I wanted something for my balanced headphone amp. But to get into the negatives of these, the only thing that I can say negative about the actual build quality of these is on the left ear cup. The adjustment yoke is super stiff on mine. You can see it's taking a decent amount of force to be able to move that in and out. I've not heard of that happening on anybody else's, so this might just be mine, but it did happen to mine, and so it's something to note. But honestly, it's not that big of a deal anyways, because once you get it adjusted to fit the size of your head, you're probably never going to adjust them again anyways. I did sometimes whenever I was wearing a hat, but honestly, most of the time they fit just as fine either way. The next real negative about these is the design of the ear pads. The pads themselves are super soft, but these are not the original ear pads. These are the original ear pads, and you can see they have basically just kind of fallen apart. I did use them for 3 years, so they lasted quite a while. But what's frustrating about them is once they deteriorated, it was kind of just like catastrophic failure. You know how carbon fiber, once it cracks, it completely falls apart. So the way that these are designed is they are glued to the mounting mechanism, but only just barely. Like the it just barely comes over the lip and it's glued down. And then once that started coming apart, it just all fell apart. So that brings me to my next point of frustration, is the mounting mechanism. I hate proprietary mounting mechanisms. I think they're stupid. I wish I could just slide the pad off and slide a new one on, but no, they have to come up with their own proprietary thing, and it makes no sense other than to force you to buy their ear pads if you ever need replacements. Either that, I mean, there are third-party ear pads you can get for these, but I don't know if there's some kind of licensing where you have to pay to make their mounting mechanism. I could be wrong there, but I just feel like it's just kind of a money grab whenever you do something proprietary like this, because it makes no sense. Now that I bought those replacement pads, I was able to tear one of those rings out of the old pads. And so what you can do with these is you can just use these to mount custom ear pads if you were to do so. You're probably not going to do that after watching this video though, because I am going to say bad things about this headphone. So all that being said, to say one final good thing about these are extremely comfortable headphones. I used to wear these every day for like 3 years. There were days where I would wear these from sunup to sundown, and they literally never got fatiguing to wear, except whenever I was wearing a hat. That would create just a little bit of a pressure point on the top of my head. But I mean, that's me wearing a hat, not the fault of the headphone. The strap is very nicely shaped to like the common curvature of a human head. So, I mean, they just fit really well, and they're super comfortable. And, you know, they're not super heavy, which isn't always the case for planar headphones, because they, you know, the magnet structure on these gets a little bit heavy. But that's kind of where my praise for these headphones ends. These also taught me a very important lesson about amplification, which is headroom is extremely important. So the harder you have to crank an amplifier, the more noise it's going to introduce. The less you have to drive an amplifier to get to the volume you want, the cleaner it's going to be. It's not having to drive as hard. You're going to get a much cleaner sound. So these on my topping L50 required high gain, and I was usually at noon or higher to get to either like just a standard enjoyable listening volume, or to like, you know, kind of a loud, fun listening volume. The main problem that I have with these is to make them sound as good as they can, you need a decent amount of power. So I used to run these off of the Shit Full of 2 whenever I was first getting into headphones and audiophilia, and those drove them plenty loud, but they didn't really drive the best quality. And part of that is the fact that it was a Shit Full of 2. It took most of the power of the Shit Full of 2 to get it to the listening volume that I was going for. So the problem that I have with that is that that is a $200 amplifier. Actually, let's look and see how much it is right now, because it could have changed. So it's a $230 amplifier. So part of that valuable lesson that I learned is that whenever you give a headphone the power that it needs, it kind of unlocks the full potential of the headphone. There are plenty of headphones out there that are hard to drive, that you can drive off of lower powered amps, but to really get the full quality of sound that they are capable of producing, you have to give them a decent amount of power. And so with these, that took a topping L50, which is more expensive than the headphone itself. I don't like that, because at that point, this is no longer just a $190 headphone. To get them to their full potential, you have to buy a headphone amp that costs more than the headphone itself. And I would much rather be able to recommend a headphone, especially in the $200 range, because that's kind of, like I said, I feel like in that $200 range, someone's probably buying a headphone that they want to be their good headphone. They're probably not going to spend more on the amplifier than the headphone just to get like a good high quality listening experience. So let's talk about how these sound. These are typically described as a warm headphone. So if you were to look at a measurement graph, which unfortunately I'm not going to show because I'm not sure how the licensing works on that. It costs money to do measurements on these, and I don't want to take somebody else's work and, you know, post it on my video. But if you were to look at a measurement of these, and you can Google it, you'll see a bit of a bump in the mid bass and fairly neutral everywhere else. So that mid bass is kind of more presented. And so that's where that description of warmth comes from. I've also heard these described as like a chill or laid back headphone. And at first I agreed, but after listening to these for 3 years and then going back to my Shure 9500s, which I've already said I enjoyed more than these, I realized that these are just a boring headphone. They don't really do anything exciting at all. even whenever you plug them into a $230 amplifier and unleash what I think is probably their full potential. I mean, there are better amplifiers out there, but you're going so much more expensive than the headphone at that point. Why bother? You know, you have to spend more than the headphone itself to unlock what these are capable of. And even at that potential, they're not as good as other headphones that I've heard on weaker sources. So yeah, the value in these, I just don't see it. They're extremely well built and they're extremely comfortable, but when you're spending this much money on a headphone, you want it to at least sound fun. You want it to at least remind you that it exists. You know, I was thinking about this the other day, and these are kind of so boring that I almost wish that they did something bad just so I could be like, oh yeah, there they are. And they just exist. And that's not what I want out of a $200 headphone. I definitely don't want to have to spend another $230 to make it sound good. These are not there for me. And what's funny is, even though that these are a warm headphone and the mid bass is what's most pronounced on these, that's not even what sounds the best on them. It's kind of more into that upper mid range in the female vocal range. But even then, what these do the best at, which I think is female vocals, I've heard better on cheaper headphones. You know, that's it. That's all you need to know. And you know, that planar sound that you would expect, I don't think you get it out of these. The monoprice M1060s were about the same amount of money, and they sounded big and heavy and wide, and that's what I would expect out of a planar headphone. And these are basically just a nerfed down version of that. They don't do anything exciting to me. The highs are not clean. Yeah, I'm kind of running out of things to say because I just don't like them. So in conclusion, yes, they're comfortable. They're built extremely well, but to get the sound that these are capable of, you have to spend more than the headphone is worth on an amplifier. You know what? I didn't even figure in the cost of the DAC. A DAC is going to cost you another $100. So that's $330 of signal to push to these to get what these are fully capable of. I can't recommend these ever. I don't think they're worth it. But really, in reality, if you are in the market to spend $200 on headphones, for the cost of these, you could get Schiit 9500s and Audio-Technica ATH M40Xs. And then you have two headphones that I would honestly rather listen to than these. You know, and those don't require a huge source to plug into. You can plug those into almost anything and they'll sound decent. You know, obviously they'll sound better as you upgrade, but yeah, no, I can't recommend these. So if you've made it this far into the video, I sincerely appreciate it. If you would please like and subscribe, it does help me out quite a lot. Also, if you would please leave a comment if you just want to say hi, or if you want to ask any questions, I will happy to answer those as best I can. But that does help the algorithm push me up a little bit and recommend it to other people. If you would like to check me out on social media, I'll leave links for that in the description as well. But that's it, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Thank you.